now, that video last night. Why in the hell did they release that video at 5 or 6 o'clock last night when it was dark?
I don't know. I think we saw this happen just
Ferguson,
right,
right?
Yeah, I don't know what the thought process there is. If you anticipate having any sort of violent protest, which I think they were preparing at least for potential for.
Did you watch the press conference?
I did.
And they were, I couldn't believe what I was watching. They were sure there was going to be protesting.
Yeah.
And really were just trying to make sure people didn't get out of hand. And at the end of the day, this Chicago was not Ferguson.
No, and I think you actually have more likelihood that the violence won't be as severe in larger cities than you do smaller. Because I think when you have those big cities, they're spread out so much more,
right?
And there's not a lot of people that live in the cities themselves.
Yeah.
So
it also helped that the family had settled for like $5 million.
Yeah,
something.
I think
and that the officer has been charged with murder.
Right, and the actual incident happened a year ago. So I think emotionally maybe. The city was removed from it, but
as much as it's probably a newer story for the rest of us,
right?
That is something that's ingrained in those people in Chicago. This story has been going on it's been heavy.
400 days, I guess it was.
So you watched that. Listen,
I did.
Obviously the kid is on PCP. That they found it in his system, messed up in the head, running down the middle of the street with a knife in his hand. Police told him to stop. He didn't stop. And they say that he might have slashed a tire of a police car. The car pulls up. The dash cam video shows almost everything, and then just not enough. I wish I would have been able to see more. But you could see immediately the police officer shot him. And then the shots kept coming. The guy's on the ground, and you can see the puff of smoke coming out of the body. That was just the hardest thing I've ever seen to watch, ever watched.
Yeah.
That puff of smoke coming out of this body. The initial shot is questionable. Everything after that, in my opinion, didn't have to be done. What are your thoughts as a trained police officer?
Yeah, well, it's funny because, not funny, peculiar, that we just did the training with Andrew and Jim last week. So, I think Andrew can probably attest to this, that sometimes when you're in the incident themselves, you see things maybe that perhaps other people aren't seeing, especially from a video, because the video really doesn't tell the whole story. Everybody thinks it does, it really doesn't until you're there.
Well, there's a whole left side of what was going on.
Right, but even if you had the whole frame, it doesn't give you the emotions that go on there. You don't know what was said. You don't know how what his facial expressions were.
Yeah.
So let's make some assumptions here. Let's make an assumption that he's running down the middle of the road and he's making threats.
Right.
He's going to do this.
I'm
going to do this. All those things. Let's assume that he's doing that, and let's assume that this went on for a period of time. Because if you watch the whole video, just that one officer is like 6 minutes. Him driving to the scene, and then you could see clips of this the victim running around.
Yeah.
So obviously there's some serious issues there, and let's he's got a knife on him. So is he dangerous? Yeah, I think you can make the assumption he's at least has potential.
I mean, he's on. We find out later he's on something.
Right, he's got problems.
He's out of control.
So let's make some assumptions that he's acting violently and he's talking. Okay.
Sure.
So that obviously the officers are aware of that because they're communicating with each other as they come to the scene. So let's assume everybody
they
knows,
the danger.
Hey, this guy could be dangerous,
Yeah.
and he's armed. So he runs down the middle of the road. A couple of cars stop. When you use force, there's several factors that have to be involved. One is it has to be reasonable, it has to be necessary, and it has to be without recklessness. So all of those things have to come into play. So even if you have a scenario in which you are justified, the person's a threat to you, say they pull a gun directly on you, and more than maybe even take a shot at you, but behind them is a 50 kids in a play yard. Well, you can't just start taking shots at them because now you're being reckless. So it looks like the backdrop was safe. It looks like it was like a highway of some sort. Right.
Highway fence.
Right. Yeah. So it appears to be that. So it wasn't reckless in that respect. So now you look at, okay, was it necessary? That's where I start to have an issue because, okay, so maybe it appears to me from the video, without a full explanation, he makes some sort of arm movement. What you can't tell is that arm movement as a result of being shot, or as a result of maybe having a knife in his hand, making some sort of gesture like, get away from me.
He seemed to be running away from them.
he starts to turn, but at one point
Yeah.
he sort of slows
Yeah.
and he makes some sort of arm gesture. But you can't tell if that's he gets hit and it's a reaction to being hit,
Correct, yeah.
or if it's some sort of threat, like makes a gesture with the knife. Okay, so let's assume it's that, and he gets shot.
So now maybe there is justification for the initial shoot.
Right.
The initial couple, maybe 1, 2, 3 shots.
He gets shot. He
Yeah.
gets spun to the ground.
Hits the ground. Now he's on the ground.
Right.
And another 13, 12,
That's
13
what they're
shots.
saying, and I have to believe that
Bullets go into this
Right.
kid on the ground.
the puff of smoke you're talking about is a round striking the concrete.
Oh, okay.
That's what it looks like.
Got it.
So, and actually, there's one other. When he first goes to the ground, you'll see one other that does exactly the same thing. It's
Okay.
skipping around off the ground.
So basically, when that comes out,
Right at some point in that confrontation, he's on the ground.
yeah, you're giving the benefit of the doubt up to the point after the third or fourth round that went in him, and he's basically on the ground, no threat.
If he
And
had a
another
gun.
13. If he had a gun,
I'm
it
not
would
saying
be
he had a
different.
gun and he still
Right.
had it in his hand.
Yeah.
You could still make the argument that,
And they might try that.
but he had a knife.
Yeah.
And a knife
Yeah.
is not easily, you could throw it, but it's
Right,
not,
right.
when you're on the ground incapacitated, it's not easy for you to, have the ability to throw a
Yeah.
knife with any sort of force.
Right, well,
Or you're under the influence of PCP.
Well, even
Well,
that
I
would,
think
even that because
let me compare any threat
Yeah.
while he was on the ground.
I don't see it, and we talked in the break, and I suppose if he had a handgun or some type of other weapon, that it could still potentially be a threat.
Sure.
However, with a knife, it would be nearly impossible to remain a threat on the ground like that, and he did look fairly incapacitated, so
Yeah.
I don't see how he was still a threat. And then once that threat stops, then he has to stop firing and move to take him into custody.
I've been doing this for a long time. I've never seen such a polarized time
Yeah.
that I've lived through. I know that the late '60s, early '70s, and the '60s and '70s. There was a lot going on. It was tough, but in our modern time, I've never seen anything the way it is now. And this attack on police departments, some of it unfortunately comes out to be legitimate. But most police officers would never do what that police officer did yesterday. Do you agree with that?
I do agree, and I think folks have to remember sometimes that yes, we are a unique group of individuals if you want to categorize us all
Yeah.
together, and you do have to, to a certain degree, much like the military, stick together and support each other because there isn't much support other than yourselves. However,
Right.
nobody wants in law enforcement. Nobody wants corrupt cops or cops that are out there injuring people. We want it less than anybody.
Yeah.
So we're there to we try to weed them out. I think what you see now is immense scrutinization, mainly
There's
because
a
of video.
Focus going on right
I mean,
now.
look at football. One play gets 17 camera
Yeah.
angles and scrutinized 50 times. I
Right.
think the
You're
advent of
you're on instant replay. I'm afraid.
over and over, right? And
Yeah.
all you can hope for is that when people look at it, they try to look at it with the perspective that when it happened,
Right.
not now, not when you have all this information. It's what information you had when the incident occurred and the decisions that were made based on that
What
information.
you're pulling.